Someone's asking, why not start Stidham? We've talked about this, but why do you think not?
I don't think he's ready to play. I think what you see with Stidham is going to be way worse than what you're seeing with Cam. And secondly, Stidham doesn't do any of the things as a runner that Cam does. So you're just getting caught into a situation where you got a drop back quarterback with no weapons. I mean, I don't see how Stidham is going to fix any of these problems. It's certainly not going to be an answer, I don't think, for this team. If you're going to put a quarterback like Jared Stidham in the game, you better have some playmakers around him, because he's not individually a playmaker like Cam Newton is with his legs. So I just don't see how that fixes anything.
This is a good question here about culture, Evan. We talk about assets. Okay. What is interesting here is Bill giving up on the season is something we've never discussed here. Okay.
Yeah.
This is a conversation that goes on in every city, in every sport at this time of year, because it makes sense. You give up on the year, the fan base is there, you're not going anywhere. You want something to happen. We've seen it. Both you and I are enormous Celtics fans. We've ridden along in tanky seasons with the promise of a new day and rooting for the kids, and that brings you joy. You're not worried about rings or championships here. You don't really have that with this team because there isn't a lot of up and coming right now. So the question is, what does this do to the culture here? Asked by Steven. If Bill throws the towel in, because you're doing this to people like Devin McCourty and again, James White, and people who have made sacrifices for you. They played this season with the threat of COVID hanging over them for you. You have other people considering whether or not to come back next year who you might need to bring back. And this is an important part of the conversation people aren't talking about. Do you lose Hightower? Do you lose Chung? Do you lose? I mean, Chung might retire anyway, even though he tweeted this week that he misses it. Do you lose everything you've built in a move like this? We've seen them trade people, but it was always one step back to take two steps forward. This would not be this scenario. This is a burn it down scenario.
I think that I think it's tricky because it's not necessarily about tanking or about trying to get the number one pick or anything like that. I think you do need to approach the season a little bit differently moving forward, in the fact that you are going to have to grow with the young players. You're going to have to let the young players make mistakes, right? And I think that's the biggest difference. It's not necessarily that you're going to try to purposely lose games or you're going to throw in the towel or anything like that, but moving forward, you have to see what you have with some of these pieces. So the options of, like, Devin Asiasi, when he gets out there on the field again, him just leaking out into the flat every single play, what is that really benefiting, really? So I think that that's a thing that you got to look at, is that you have to try to unlock some of these younger players, allow them to be sort of productive or sink or swim. And that's what you got to find out over the next 8 weeks. I don't think it's about tanking for the number one pick. I don't think it's about, a culture thing. I think it's mostly about, you need to evaluate the current players on their roster, both rookies and experienced players, and say, who's going to be here with us in 2021? Who's going to be here with us beyond that? Because I think there's probably a pretty good chance that, for instance, Joe Tooney and Stephon Gilmore, and maybe the McCourty twins, maybe some of these older players that are going to start retiring, all of those guys are not necessarily part of the future. So let's see some of the younger guys play. I'm not saying take Devin McCourty off the field for Kyle Duggar, but let Kyle Duggar play over, let's say, an Adrian Phillips a little bit more, because Adrian Phillips is a one-year deal free agent signing who's been nice, but he's a nice player on a Tom Brady Patriot team, not a nice player on this version, a 2-6 Patriot team.
Yeah. All right. We'll ask Leon here. Kamitsis. Sounds like an Elena. What's up, Leon? Sounds like a Greek. Wants to know why Bill has such a tough time drafting wide receiver. And again, we've talked about drafting in general, about having guys that he likes, having people who speak well of those types of people, looking for certain traits that maybe other people aren't as focused in on. And then, as you mentioned, locking in on his guys. But why particularly wide receiver?
To me, honestly, I think the reason why they've struggled out wide receiver is because they haven't really tried to draft wide receiver. If you just try to hit one guy at a time, I don't know what you expect is going to come from that, right? If you just try to invest 1 year at a time, every couple of years you sprinkle in a wide receiver pick, it's obviously not going to work out for you. I just don't see how the investment in the position is my biggest issue. Now, the second thing in terms of evaluation and what actually they're evaluating incorrectly. I think that what they're missing mostly with the skill players is guys that are actually going to have their athleticism and their explosiveness and their speed translate from college to the NFL. So at the college level with N'Keal Harry, he looks like a much faster player. Then all of a sudden, when you get to the NFL level, well, you can't reverse field at the NFL level anymore. You can't weave in and out of 8 guys
Right, and
on a screen pass and take it 80 yards to the house. That's
the
nothing.
play
You
that
have to do
everybody
anything
saw
like that.
on the draft tape when he takes it all the way across the field
Right.
there, and everyone's like, "Ooh!" And then you
Right.
haven't seen anything close. How many times they run him on a jet sweep and he gets caught in the backfield or just for a 2-yard gain on the edge, and you're like, "Wow, he didn't run away from everybody." And they stopped doing that. He didn't have that game speed in the NFL.
Right. So I think that's the biggest thing. You look at a team like Pittsburgh, and everybody's always like, how does Pittsburgh get all these wide receivers? I don't get it, right? You look at a team like Pittsburgh, the first thing that they prioritize, number one on their list, is translatable explosiveness. Is this guy's athleticism real? Is he really a good athlete at any level of football, not just in college, but in the pros? Is he going to translate as a good athlete? And that's why you get the difference between N'Keal Harry and Chase Claypool. Chase Claypool was a combine standout. He was a combine hero. He ran in the 4.4s. He jumped out of the gym. He did everything he possibly could have done. And then you turn on the tape at Notre Dame and you see that speed, size translate in a way down the field that it never did for N'Keal Harry at the college level. And it's just a entirely different evaluation process. So I think way too much is being put on character, way too much is being put on, okay, here are a couple of skill sets that he has, a couple of things that we could do, that we do, that he can do, yak, things like that, ball carrying. That's nice, right? That's good. But unfortunately, at the NFL level, to be an effective ball carrier after the catch, you have to get open and catch the ball first to even get into that point, into that phase of the game. So that's the biggest thing I think is looking back on their kind of misses at wide receiver in the past. It's been they've drafted good athletes, but not elite athletes. And it's not just athleticism, but you need to start to look for the fuller picture.
All right. One other thing I'm going to talk here. We've got Mike over on YouTube. Any other city, Bill would be on the hot seat. Now, we know that's not the case here in New England. I will pose one question to you, though, Evan. You can't erase a track record of 20 years of not just miles ahead of his peers in-game decision-making, but also team building. And again, that's also with Tom Brady, which covers up a ton of flaws, and we've seen that over the years with some of those teams, but it still doesn't matter. Belichick has been able to find players all over the place. He's a great second drafter also with a lot of teams, bringing in guys who were drafted with a high pedigree and other teams didn't work out, bringing them in, getting the most out of them here. How many people have left New England and gone on to sign massive deals elsewhere after they were finally put in a position to succeed because their previous home couldn't do that for them. So there are plenty of things he does well in evaluating talent, but after the run that he's had and the situation they're in, if Bill Belichick were two separate people, Evan, the GM might be under the hot seat. Bill Belichick as a whole won't be and isn't because of everything he's done. And you're not bringing somebody in to do a better job, but there does beg the question on whether Bill's able to recognize it, whether at some point Robert has a difficult conversation with him and says, Bill, what do you think we bring in somebody else here on personnel stuff to maybe help out? You don't know how that's going to land. You could have a Bill Parcells, Bobby Greer 2.0.
Supposed to do that as Nick Caserio.
Caserio is, but what's evident here is Caserio, while he might have a lot of skill at evaluating talent, for whatever reason right now, it doesn't appear that somebody has that voice in Foxborough that is able to, you're not going to overrule Bill, but able to move him off his spot. And that doesn't seem to be the case right now.
I think that's the biggest thing. And you mentioned also like guys that they've signed that have gone on to cash in, like a Trent Brown or something like that. I also do want to point out that a lot of their players that they draft get poached. But the problem is that strategy, you can do that, right? You can let Trey Flowers walk. You can let these players that they develop in-house that then go on to get huge contracts. Malcolm Butler, Trey Flowers, Chandler Jones, trading him. We can go right down the list, as long as you can replace those players in the draft. But when you don't replace those players, that's what we're seeing out of recently with the Patriots, is that they let a Trey Flowers walk Where's the replacement? There isn't one. They let Kyle Van Noy walk. Where's the replacement? There isn't one. And on the offensive side of the ball, Gronkowski retires. Where's the replacement? They draft 2 guys in the 3rd round this year that have done absolutely nothing. So that's the problem, is when you keep on doing that, right, then you continuously you put yourself in a position where you need to cash in on your draft picks. And if you don't cash in on those draft picks, then here we are. Then your roster is talentless. Not talentless, but you know what I'm trying to say. So I think the biggest thing, though, in terms of Belichick being on the hot seat, it's not so much that. They definitely just need to get somebody like a Nick Caserio. Needs to have a little bit of more of a backbone, I would say, with Belichick, and say, hey, listen, we've been watching these guys since last May. We've been talking to scouts. We've been talking to coaches. We've been boots on the ground in some situations, going out and scouting these guys. You might like Kyle Duggar, Bill, but I'm telling you right now that the better football player is going to be Kenneth Murray, who went 23, the pick the Patriots traded out of. Or if we traded up 1 spot, draft Justin Jefferson, or 2 spots, I guess, to leapfrog Minnesota, he was going to be the better player. That's what we need. We need somebody that has a little bit of a backbone, a little bit of an ability to stand up to Bill, because right now he definitely gets all of it, right? He gets all of the say in that draft room. And so far in the last couple of years, it hasn't really panned out the way that it did in the beginning part of the dynasty. And now I think he needs to sort of evaluate that and realize he's always so good. And this is what becomes so frustrating for me, because he's always so good at identifying mistakes and realizing when they're not being good at something and how to fix it, and understanding when a player like a N'Keal Harry isn't panning out. They don't just put all their eggs in that one basket, right? They move on and they find another option, and they keep working the problem. This time, it's just they're not doing any of those things.